The night my parents asked me for $75,000 to pay for my sister's wedding, I finally understood that in their eyes my life had never really been mine. It was just an emergency fund for their pride. I was standing in my apartment in Portland, Oregon, staring out at the wet city lights, when my past came rushing back like a bad storm, rolling over the mountains. For years I had convinced myself that the worst was behind me. I had built a career, a life, a little cocoon of safety, where no one could tell me I was not enough. Then my mother opened her mouth and shattered it. "Claire," she said, voice sweet as syrup, "we need your help with Sophia's wedding." My father sat beside her on my couch like it was his throne. Arms folded, jaw tight. It was the way he always sat when he was about to set a rule and act like it came straight from the universe. I knew it was going to be bad, but I did not know how bad until my mother said the number. $75,000, she chirped, as if she were asking to borrow a casserole dish. "That will cover the venue, the decor, the extra catering. The Callisters have a certain standard, you know. We cannot look small next to them." For a second, I thought I had misheard her. I just stared, waiting for the punchline. It never came. Let me make something clear. Years ago, when I got accepted into a cybersecurity program, I begged these same people to co-sign a small student loan so I could go to college. They told me debt was shameful, that I needed to build character by fighting on my own. They watched me juggle multiple jobs, sleep in a freezing dorm room, and live on instant noodles and $5 meals. Now they were sitting on my sofa asking for enough money to buy a small house so my little sister could have chandeliers and imported flowers. I felt something sharp and electric form inside my chest. It was not just anger. It was recognition. This was not new. This was the same old story dressed up in white lace and champagne flutes. My name is Claire Morgan, and for most of my life, I played the role my family wrote for me. I was the reliable daughter, the fixer, the quiet one who did not make a fuss. I was the one who swallowed her feelings so my parents could sleep at night believing they were good people. We grew up in a small house outside Spokane, Washington. From the outside, we looked like any ordinary American family. There were faded family photos on the wall, my mother's classroom art projects stacked in the hallway, and my father's old auto shop calendars pinned above the garage door. But inside that house, there was a line drawn down the middle that no one would admit was there. On one side of the line was Sophia. Sophia the baby. Sophia the princess. Sophia the golden girl with the perfect curls and the loud laugh, the one my parents had apparently been waiting for their whole lives. On the other side was me. It was never openly cruel. That is the thing about favoritism in a toxic family. It hides in 1,000 small moments until you start to believe you are imagining it. Like the night I brought home a report card full of straight A's. I remember standing in the kitchen, heart pounding, holding out the paper like it was a ticket to a new life. My mother barely glanced at it as she stirred the pot on the stove. "That is great, honey," she said, eyes on the saucepan. "Can you set the table?" 2 weeks later, Sophia came home with a last-minute trophy from a regional dance competition. Everyone knew half the teams had dropped out because of a snowstorm, but that did not matter. My father called every relative we had. My mother cried. They put the trophy right in the center of the mantel, moving my honor roll certificate to the side to make room. It kept happening. Birthdays, holidays, little victories. When something good happened to Sophia, it was a family event. When something good happened to me, it was nice. Honey followed by a chore. By the time I reached my final year of high school, I had already decided that college was my escape route. I was going to leave that house, leave the quiet suffocation of being the background child, and build something that belonged only to me. The morning the acceptance letter arrived, I ran into the kitchen so fast I nearly slipped on the tile. My chest was tight with hope. My hands shook as I held out the envelope. "Mom. Dad," I got in. I breathed. "The cybersecurity program in Seattle. It is a good one. They said it is competitive and My mother Linda dried her hands on a dish towel and gave my father a look. "Well," she said carefully. "You are 18 now, Claire. You will have to figure out how to pay for it. We cannot take on debt. Debt ruins people." My father, Robert, nodded like a judge delivering a sentence. "We were never given handouts," he said. "We worked for everything. You should too. No loans. Claire, you do not want chains around your neck your whole life. I mentioned scholarships, part-time work, federal aid. Then quietly I asked about co-signing a loan, not paying it for me, just putting their names next to mine so the bank would trust me. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. People use loans as shortcuts, she said. You should be stronger than that. The word strong settled on me like a weight. I nodded, because what else was there to do? I went upstairs and cried into a pillow so no one would have to see how weak I really was. In the end, the only people who showed up for me were my grandparents. On my mother's side, Harold and June Bennett. They drove me to a small bank branch in a town 2 hours away so my parents would not have to know the details. They sat beside me as we signed the papers. Opportunity is not a sin, sweetheart, Grandpa Harold told me as he slid the pen across the counter. Needing help does not make you less. It would take years before I fully believed him. I built my life the hard way. 3 jobs, night classes, a dorm room so cold in winter, I sometimes fell asleep on the library floor because it was warmer there. I remember microwaving cheap noodles at 2 in the morning, telling myself it would all be worth it when I finally got out. Eventually, I did. I got the degree. I got a job. I moved to Portland and into a small apartment that was mine, every square foot paid for with hours no one would ever see. But every time I went back home, nothing had changed. Sophia still sparkled at the center of the room. My parents still bragged about her like she was their life's work. I was the daughter who had turned out fine, said with the same tone people used for an old car that still somehow ran. I thought distance would protect me. I thought success would rewrite the story. But as my parents sat in my apartment asking me to pay for Sophia's fairy tale wedding, I finally understood something else. They had not changed because I had never made them, and this time I was not going to play my old role. This time I was not going to be the good daughter who sacrificed everything so everyone else could look good. I looked at my mother, my father, and the ghosts of all the times I had stayed silent, and I felt a cold, clear thought click into place. They had written the rules for Sophia, but I was about to rewrite them for myself. I did not know it yet, but saying no to that wedding would drag every secret, every buried injustice, every piece of family drama back into the light. It would turn our little private favoritism into full-blown confrontation, and it would be the closest thing to revenge I would ever take. If you grow up in a toxic family, the big betrayals never come out of nowhere. They are just the final cuts after years of tiny ones that nobody else sees. When I think about the injustice that shaped me, I do not just remember that night with the wedding demand. I remember the quieter nights that came before it. I remember the birthday dinner where my cake was an afterthought. I turned 16 that year. My father worked late at the shop. My mother said she was exhausted from a long day with her students. We will keep it simple, she said. You are not a little girl anymore. I blew out candles on a grocery store sheet cake while my parents checked their phones. There were no friends, no party, no special plans. I told myself it did not matter. 2 months later, Sophia turned 12. For weeks, my mother was on the phone planning a surprise. On the day itself, the backyard was filled with balloons, glitter, and a rented photo booth. Every cousin, neighbor, and classmate came. There were fairy lights and music and a huge banner that said, "Our Princess Sophia." Nobody remembered that my birthday had been less than 1 season before. It was like that with everything. On Thanksgiving, if I cooked, it was help. If Sophia stirred a pot for 10 seconds, my mother cooed about what a natural she was in the kitchen. At Christmas, my gifts were practical. A sweater I needed anyway. A set of sheets. Sophia got jewelry. Spa days. Dance lessons. A new phone. One Thanksgiving dinner stands out the most, though, because it was the night my relationship with Sophia cracked wide open. It was the first time I hosted my own family in my own space. I was in my mid-20s, still paying off loans, still counting every dollar. My apartment in Seattle back then was tiny, but I scrubbed it until it shone. Spent hours cooking and felt proud when I laid everything out on the thrift store table. I had refinished myself. Sophia walked in, looked around, and laughed. "This is, cozy," she said, in that way that made cozy sound like cramped. "You really live here." My parents exchanged a quick glance. That look said everything. "We are worried about Claire. We wish she had more, but it was the kind of worry you wear like a badge. not the kind you actually help with. During dinner, Sophia picked at the stuffing, then leaned over to whisper to my mother, though not quietly enough. Mom, the turkey at the Callisters last Christmas was much more tender. They had this cranberry glaze, and their dining room is huge with a view of the river. My mother nodded, eyes lighting up with the glamour of someone else's world. I sat there with my thrifted plates and secondhand chairs and felt myself disappear again. Later, when I brought out a pie made from my grandmother June's recipe, the one that always made me feel close to her, Sophia took one bite and shrugged. "It is fine," she said. "But Grandma's crust was flakier. Maybe you overworked the dough." I snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough that my voice came out sharper than usual as I said, "If you do not like the food, Sophia, you do not have to eat it. And if my place is not good enough for you, you do not have to come back." Silence fell over the table like a curtain. My mother gasped softly. My father's jaw clenched. Sophia's eyes widened, then narrowed. "You know what she said?" tossing her napkin onto the plate. "Maybe I will not." She left that night in a flurry of insulted dignity, my parents trailing after her. My father muttered something about me being ungrateful. My mother did not look back. We did not speak for months after that. When drama like that happens in a normal family, there is usually some kind of repair. An apology. A phone call. An awkward attempt to talk it through at Christmas or at a birthday party. In our family, the fight just became another unspoken rule. Claire is the difficult one. Claire is sensitive. Claire is the one who ruins holidays. Sophia slid back into the center of their lives as if nothing had happened. From what I heard through relatives, she kept dancing, kept dating flashy guys, and eventually met the one who would change everything. Evan Callister. The first time I heard his name, it was during a rushed phone call with my mother. I had moved from Seattle to Portland by then, having finally landed a better job at a larger company with a real security team and a chance at meaningful promotions. "He is from a good family," my mother said, and I could hear the hunger in her voice. "They have a family business, some kind of investment firm. Real money, Claire old money. They have this mansion outside the city where they host Christmas parties. I am telling you, her life is going to be very different." I made some neutral sounds staring at the tiny crack in my ceiling. "That is great, Mom," I said. "I am happy for her." "Of course you are," she replied quickly, as if daring me not to be. "You always land on your feet. You have your career, your independence. Sophia deserves her fairy tale too." There it was again. My success turned into proof that I needed nothing, so they owed me nothing. Meanwhile, Sophia's every step up the ladder was a family project. I got a promotion around that time. A big one. My boss pulled me into a glass-walled conference room and told me I was being made lead on a high-profile security project for a major client. It came with better pay, more responsibility, and a title that actually sounded impressive. I called my parents on the drive home, excitement bubbling in my throat. My father listened, then said, "That is good, Claire. Just make sure you do not burn yourself out. You know somebody has to have kids and give us grandbabies one day. You cannot just work forever." I was quiet for a moment. "Right," I said, "of course." That same week, my mother sent a group text about Sophia's new car, a glossy vehicle Evan had helped her lease. She attached photos from every angle. "Look how blessed our girl is," she wrote. "We are so proud." Nobody sent a message about my promotion. All of this is why when my parents showed up at my apartment years later and asked me to bankroll Sophia's wedding, it did not come out of nowhere. It was just the biggest, boldest version of what they had always believed. Sophia is the star, I am the support staff. Back then, I still thought I could explain my way out of it. That if I just chose the right words, if I laid out the history clearly enough, my parents would finally see the injustice. They would feel a stab of shame maybe and back down. I had no idea yet that people who benefit from favoritism rarely give it up without a fight. And I had no idea that in trying to say no, I was about to trigger a confrontation that would drag every buried grievance, every secret, every piece of family drama and betrayal into the daylight. When my parents left that night after naming their price for the wedding, the apartment felt strangely quiet, like the air itself was holding its breath. I sat on the edge of my bed and tried to steady my thoughts. For 3 days I went through the motions. I wrote code, reviewed security reports, sat through meetings where people talked about breaches and risk management and mitigation strategies. I was good at protecting other people's systems from intrusion. I had never learned how to protect my own life from my family. But the harder I tried to focus on work, the more the past crept in. I remembered my father's shrug the day I begged him to reconsider co-signing that loan. "We cannot afford to rescue you," he said. "You are smart, Claire. You will figure something out." The thing about figuring something out is that you start to believe you are supposed to carry everything alone. Every bill, every disappointment, every hurt feeling. I remembered collapsing onto my dorm bed after a double shift at the campus cafe and a late-night stalking job at a grocery store off the highway. I remembered waking up with my cheek stuck to an open textbook in the library because I had fallen asleep mid-paragraph. Those nights my revenge fantasies were small. I did not imagine grand scenes of payback or dramatic confrontations. I imagined my parents needing me one day and me calmly saying, "No, I cannot help." I imagined the silence on the other end of the line. I imagined them seeing me finally as someone who had limits. That was all I wanted back then. Not power, not their suffering, just to stop being the one who always bent. On the third day after their visit, I opened my desk drawer at home and pulled out an old folder I had shoved to the back. Inside were the last statements from my student loans. The ones I had kept out of some strange mix of pride and masochism. The numbers were long since paid off, but the memory of them still stung. I traced the faded ink with my fingertip and felt the tiredness of those years wash over me. The hunger, the cold, the constant low-grade fear of what would happen if I slipped even for a moment. My parents had watched me walk that tightrope and called it character building. Yet here they were asking me to build a golden bridge for Sophia so she would not have to get her shoes dirty. Something inside me hardened. That night I drafted a message to my parents. "I have considered your request. My answer is no. Please do not involve the rest of the family in this." My finger hovered over the send button. I could almost feel the rush of their outrage through the screen. The phone calls, the guilt trips, the accusations of selfishness. Instead of sending it, I turned off my phone, grabbed my keys, and drove across town to my grandparents' small bungalow. If anyone could help me untangle what I was feeling, it was them. Grandma June opened the door before I could knock twice. Her silver hair was twisted up in its usual messy knot, and she smelled faintly of flower and lavender. "Baby," she said, cupping my face, "you look tired." That was all it took. The truth spilled out of me at her kitchen table, the same table where she had taught me how to roll out pie crusts. When I was 13, I told them about the wedding, the money, the way my parents had acted like I was a bad daughter for even hesitating. Grandpa Harold sat with his hands folded, listening. He did not interrupt. He did not play devil's advocate. He did not suggest that they meant well. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "Protecting yourself is not betrayal," he said. "It is adulthood." I let out a shaky breath. "They are going to say I am cruel," I whispered. "Of course they are," he replied. "People who are used to you saying yes will always accuse you of cruelty the first time you say no. That does not make them right." Grandma June reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You do not owe them a fairy tale for Sophia," she said gently. "You already paid for your own future with blood and bone." That was enough. I thought about the quiet little will they had mentioned once, the one where they had insisted on treating me and Sophia equally. No favoritism, no secret clauses. Just two granddaughters split down the middle. "It is not about the money," I said. "I know," Grandpa answered. "That is what scares them." On the drive home, something settled in me. I was done begging for their understanding. I was done arguing my case like a lawyer in front of a judge who had already decided the verdict. This was not about making them see the injustice. It was about finally refusing to participate in it. I did not know yet how ugly it would get. I did not know about the calls that were coming, the manipulation, the way my refusal would be twisted into some grand act of betrayal. All I knew was that the next time they asked, my answer would be clear. And once I said it out loud, there would be no going back. The pressure started, the way family pressure always does, with concern dressed up as kindness. The first call came from my cousin Naomi, the one who always took it upon herself to mediate drama she barely understood. "I heard you are feeling overwhelmed," she said, without even saying hello. "Everyone is worried about you, Claire. This is a wedding, not a war." I almost laughed. Overwhelmed. That was the word my parents had apparently chosen. Not cornered, not used. Overwhelmed, like I was just a fragile woman who could not handle a few phone calls. "I am not overwhelmed," I said evenly. "I just do not want to pay for it." She sighed. "You know how your mom gets?" she murmured. She grew up with nothing. She wants to look good in front of the Callisters. And you are doing so well. You have that big job, that nice apartment. You would not even miss the money. It was always the same story. My success made me immune to harm. My boundaries were negotiable because I could afford to set them. Over the next few days, the calls kept coming. An aunt I had not seen in years. A neighbor from our old street who somehow had an opinion. They love you, one said. Think about your sister, said another. She will be humiliated if the wedding is not what they promised. Humiliated. There it was. The real enemy was not debt or injustice or favoritism. It was embarrassment. The idea that someone might look at our family and see the cracks. The worst part was the message from a number I did not recognize. Hi, Claire. It is Evan. Your sister is really stressed. Your parents told us you are hesitant about helping. Could you reconsider for her sake? I read it 3 times, a slow burn rising behind my eyes. My parents had gone to my future brother-in-law. They had taken what should have been a private disagreement and marched it into another family, painting me as the unreasonable one. Instead of replying, I blocked the number. I stared at the black screen of my phone until my own reflection blurred. That night, standing by my window, watching the rain streak down the glass, I realized something uncomfortable. For years, I had told myself that my silence was kindness, that letting things go was mature, that swallowing my hurt instead of confronting my parents made me the bigger person. But silence is not always noble. Sometimes it is the glue that holds injustice together. By never calling out the favoritism, I had trained everyone to believe I could handle anything, that I did not need inheritance or a fair shot or even basic emotional support. I had been excluded from the family story so many times that they no longer noticed I was missing. My revenge was not going to be loud. I was never going to be the kind of person who threw drinks at weddings or screamed at my parents in the street. That kind of scene might feel satisfying for a night, but it rarely changes anything. My revenge was going to be quiet and unshakable. I would not pay for the wedding. I would not apologize for it. And I would not carry their shame for them when the truth finally came out. The next Sunday, the doorbell rang just after noon. I knew who it was before I opened the door. There is a certain kind of heaviness that comes with my parents, as they move through the world, like they are always bracing for judgment. Claire, my mother said as I stepped aside. We need to talk. This is important. Important always meant urgent in their vocabulary. Urgent always meant whatever they wanted. They walked into my apartment like they owned the place. My father headed straight for the kitchen counter, setting his hands on it, as if he were inspecting the property. My mother's gaze swept over the furniture, the neat stack of mail, the faint ring on the coffee table from a forgotten mug. You have done well for yourself, she said. There was no warmth in it. Just assessment. I sat on the arm of the sofa, arms crossed, pulse steady. We heard you have been upset by some of the phone calls, my mother began. We did not tell anyone to harass you. Claire, people just care about this family. They care about Sophia. There it was. The reminder that the family drama, the betrayal, the manipulation, all of it was in service of something holy, the youngest child's happiness. I am not upset by the calls, I said. I am disappointed by you. My mother blinked as if the concept itself was offensive. In us, she asked. My father exhaled sharply. Claire, we know you are still hung up on the whole college thing, he said. But it has been years. You came out fine. Better than fine. You have a career. You own your own life. Are you really going to punish your sister's wedding because you did not get a loan co-signed? Punish. That was what they saw when I refused to sacrifice myself. Revenge to them was simply me declining to play the martyr. I thought of all the secrets that had simmered under the surface of our house. The whispered comments about who deserved what from Grandma's estate. The offhand remark my mother once made about how at least Sophia will never have to worry about money the way I did. I could feel words rising in my throat, not wild or hysterical, but clear. For once I did not swallow them. And that was the moment the tables began to turn. Before we go any further, I said, let us be honest about what is really happening here. My parents looked at me like I had suggested we strip the walls and expose the wiring. You refused to help me go to college. I continued, keeping my voice even. You said debt was dangerous, that loans were immoral, that I needed to suffer to build character. Now you are asking me to take on a giant financial hit so Sophia can have a ballroom full of flowers. You are not worried about money. You are worried about appearances. My mother's cheeks flushed. That is not fair, she snapped. We were poor when you were that age. Your father's hours were cut. The house needed repairs. I shook my head. I remember the year you bought Sophia private dance lessons, I said quietly. You told me we could not afford a prep course for my college entrance exams, but you wrote a check for 3 months of lessons without blinking. Do not tell me this is about poverty. My father rubbed the back of his neck. We did what we thought was best at the time, he muttered. No, I replied. You did what was easiest for you. It was easier to let me struggle than to challenge your fear of debt. It was easier to pay for things that made Sophia look good than to invest in things that might take years to pay off for me. You want to talk about family drama? That is the real story. My mother's mouth tightened. We are not here to relive the past, she said. We are here because your sister's wedding is at stake. The Callisters are expecting a certain level of event. We have already told them we can meet it. There is a contract with the venue. There is a non-refundable deposit. If we back out now, we will lose everything. I almost asked why that was my problem. Instead, I took a breath. This is not a court, I said. You do not get to bring me your bad decisions and demand a ruling. I am not your lawyer, and I am not your bank. If you promise something you could not afford, that is on you. For a moment, something flickered in my father's eyes. Shame, maybe? Or just recognition. My mother's voice dropped. You are going to ruin her life, she whispered. Do you understand that? If this wedding is not what people expect, it will follow her forever. People talk. They will say, our family is cheap, that we do not support her. Is that what you want, Claire? To get revenge on us by humiliating your sister? The word hit the air between us. Revenge. I let it sit there for a heartbeat, then another. This is not revenge, I said. Revenge would be letting you crash and burn without warning. Revenge would be calling the Callisters myself and telling them that you chose a ballroom over your firstborn's education. Revenge would be exposing every little secret you have tried to hide. I am simply saying no. My mother stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. You used to be so sweet, she said softly. What happened to you? I grew up, I answered. The doorbell rang. For a second, we all froze. Are you expecting someone? My father asked. No, I said, though my stomach clenched with a strange sense of inevitability. When I opened the door, Sophia was standing there. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but somehow less inflated. Her expensive coat was half-zipped, her hair pulled back in a messy knot, not in the styled waves she usually wore in photos. Hey, she said, voice almost shy. Can I come in? Behind me, I heard my mother huff. Sophia, we are in the middle of something, she began. Yeah, Sophia replied. I know. That is why I am here. She brushed past me and stepped into the living room. Her eyes flicked from my parents' tense faces to my crossed arms. Mom, Dad, could you please sit down, she asked. There was something in her tone that startled me. It was not the pleading lilt she used when she wanted something. It was firm, adult. My parents for once obeyed. Sophia turned to me. I heard what you said, she began. About the money, about college, about all of it. My mother gasped. We did not tell her everything, she protested. Sophia glanced at her. You did not have to, she said. I am not stupid. I can put pieces together. She looked back at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something like vulnerability in her eyes. You are right, Claire, she said quietly, about almost everything. The room seemed to tilt. I have let things go way too far, she continued. The venue, the decor, the guest list. I kept saying yes because it felt like proof that I was worth something, that I was not just the pretty one or the baby, or the one who always needed help. I thought if I had this big, perfect wedding, no one would notice the cracks. She swallowed. But it is too much. For them, for you, for me. It is not fair to ask you to pay for it. It is not fair that they promise things they cannot afford and then tried to guilt you into saving them. My mother stared at her like she had been slapped. Sophia, you do not understand how the world works, she said. People talk the Callisters. Sophia held up a hand. Avon and I have already talked. She said, we are going to scale down a lot. We do not need a mansion. We do not need a ballroom. We just need a place to say our vows, and some people who actually want to be there. My father's face went gray. What about the deposit? He asked faintly. We will eat it, Sophia replied. It was our mistake. For the first time, she was not separating herself from them. Then she looked directly at me. And I need to say something else, she added. I have treated you badly, for years. I joked about your apartment. I made fun of your clothes. I let mom and dad treat you like the built-in backup plan, and I never once told them to stop. She took a shaky breath. Part of that was because it was easier to believe their story about you, she said. The strong one. The one who does not need anything. Because if you needed something, and they ignored it, then what did that say about them? My mother flinched. Sophia's voice was steadier now. I am not here to ask you for money, she said. I am here to ask you to come to my wedding, even if it is smaller and cheaper, and not the kind of event the Callisters expected. I want you there because you are my sister, not my sponsor. I felt my throat tighten. My revenge was never supposed to look like this. I had imagined my parents stewing in their own bad choices, maybe. But I had not planned on Sophia standing in my living room dismantling the fantasy right alongside me. This was not the kind of payback you see in movies with dramatic courtroom scenes, or a will reading where the favorite child is excluded. This was something quieter and more complicated. This was the beginning of a family story being rewritten line by line. The wedding that actually happened 3 weeks later looked nothing like the one my parents had promised the Callisters. There was no grand stone mansion with pillars, no string quartet, no champagne towers. Instead, it took place in the community center, where my mother used to teach after-school art classes, a squat brick building at the edge of a park. The parking lot was patched with old asphalt. The entrance was decorated with fairy lights. Sophia and her friends had strung themselves, zigzagging them over borrowed potted plants and rented folding chairs. And it was beautiful. Not the kind of beauty you see on glossy wedding blogs or in magazines dropped in dentist office waiting rooms. It was softer, warmer, real. As I walked up the path toward the door, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers I had picked up from a stall at the farmer's market, my stomach twisted. I kept looking toward the lot, expecting to see my parents' car. Part of me still believed they would show up at the last minute, faces set in martyrdom, ready to reclaim the narrative about what good parents they were. They did not. Inside, the air smelled like coffee, fresh bread, and nervous excitement. The folding chairs were lined up in neat rows. Paper lanterns hung from the ceiling. Evan stood at the front beside a local officiant, tugging at his tie like it might strangle him. Sophia waited just outside a side door in a simple off-the-rack dress that somehow suited her more than any designer gown ever could. Her hair was swept back with a few loose curls framing her face. When she saw me, she smiled, and for once it did not feel performative. There was no competition in it, no need to prove anything. Just gratitude. Ready, she whispered. As I will ever be, I replied. Walk me down the aisle, she asked. I hesitated, the weight of it landing on me. That was supposed to be my father's role, the parent's role, traditionally at least. But tradition had not done us many favors. Of course, I said. We stepped into the makeshift aisle together, arms linked. The guests, a smaller crowd than my parents had envisioned, turned to watch. There were no minor celebrities, no distant acquaintances invited for the sake of appearances, just friends, a few co-workers, Evan's immediate family, some cousins who had decided to ignore the drama and come anyway. As we walked, I could feel eyes on us. I wondered what stories they had heard, that I had refused to pay, that the wedding had been downgraded, that there had been some kind of betrayal. Let them wonder, I thought. At the front, Sophia squeezed my hand before I stepped aside. As the officiant began to speak about love and commitment and choice, my mind drifted. I thought about all the women out there who had been left out of wills, pushed aside in favor of brothers or sisters, excluded from inheritances or family businesses because they did not fit the image someone wanted to project. I thought about the countless quiet injustices that never make it into dramatic courtroom scenes, but still scar people for life. Revenge, I realized, is not always about payback in the way we picture it. Sometimes it is about refusing to participate in the story that hurt you. When the ceremony ended and the small crowd erupted into applause, Sophia threw her arms around me. Thank you, she whispered into my hair, for standing up to them, for standing up for yourself. The tables needed to turn. I just did not know how to help it happen. I hugged her back, and for the first time since we were children sharing a bedroom, I believed we might actually be on the same side. At the reception, people danced to songs played off a shared playlist on someone's phone. The food was simple, but good. There were no elaborate centerpieces, just small jars of wildflowers and tea lights. Evan's mother, a woman with kind eyes and a firm handshake, approached me near the coffee urn. I have heard a lot of stories, she said without preamble, about what happened with the wedding. I braced myself. And I just want to tell you, she continued, I am glad someone drew a line. Families can get lost in trying to impress each other. There is more courage in saying no than in throwing money at a problem. Something loosened in my chest. Thank you, I said quietly. Besides, she added, glancing around the room, this feels more like a marriage and less like a performance. That is what matters. My parents still had not appeared by the time the cake was cut. They never did. There was a moment as Sophia and Evan shared their first dance under those slightly crooked fairy lights, when grief tugged hard at me. I imagined my mother standing nearby, tearing up. My father awkwardly, adjusting his tie, pretending not to be emotional. We could have had that in some other universe where they had chosen fairness over pride. But this was the universe we actually lived in. Later, when the music softened and people began to gather their things, Sophia found me near the back wall. They called, she said, Mom and Dad. They said they could not watch me settle. They said this was an embarrassment. I felt my jaw clench. And what did you say? She smiled, sad and fierce. I told them I would rather be embarrassed than indebted to their ego, she said. Then I hung up. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. It was not the explosive, cinematic revenge some people dream of. There was no judge banging a gavel, no lawyer reading a dramatic will where the tables are turned in a single moment. But it was a shift, a real one. The story of who we were as a family had officially changed. 1 week after the wedding, my parents asked to meet. The request came via a short, stiff text from my father. We would like to talk coffee. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let the silence stand as its own kind of justice. Another part of me, the part that still remembered my mother braiding my hair before school and my father teaching me how to change a tire, wanted closure. In the end, I chose a public place. Neutral ground, a small Starbucks near my father's old shop. It felt safer that way, anchored in a place where other people could see us, where the conversation could not explode without witnesses. They were already there when I arrived, sitting side by side at a small table. My mother's hands were wrapped around a paper cup lid still on. My father stared into his coffee like it was a problem he did not know how to solve. Claire, my mother said as I sat down. Her voice was softer than I expected. For a moment, none of us spoke. The hiss of the espresso machine and the murmur of other conversations filled the space. My father cleared his throat. We owe you an apology, he said. The words sounded rusty, like he had not used them in a long time. My mother nodded, eyes shiny. We were wrong about a lot of things, she said. About debt, about hardship, about you. I did not rush in to comfort them. I did not wave it away. I let the words sit there heavy and overdue. We told ourselves that we were being fair. My father continued, that treating you like an adult was respect, that not helping you with college would make you stronger. But the truth is, we were scared. We did not understand the system. Loans, interest, all of it. We were afraid of making a mistake, so we did nothing. And you paid for that. My mother squeezed the cup tighter. And with Sophia, she said, voice breaking, I went too far the other way. I wanted to give her everything I never had. I did not see that I was asking you to give up everything you did. Have to make that happen. I listened, heart steady. I cannot change what you went through in college, she whispered. I cannot give you back those years. But I can say I am sorry, truly, for not being there, for letting you carry so much alone. It was tempting to reach across the table and absolve them. To say it was all right, that I understood that we could move on, as if the past were just an old story and not the foundation of who I had become. But part of my own justice was honesty. No apology can erase it, I said gently. Those years shaped me, the exhaustion, the fear, the way I learned to expect nothing from you. That is not going to vanish because we had coffee. My father flinched, but he nodded. I know, he said, we do not want to lose you or Sophia. The way we acted around the wedding, the pressure, the guilt, that was us trying to hang on to some image of ourselves that was already gone. I thought of all the stories they had told relatives over the years. The proud tales about Sophia's dance trophies and relationships. The vague, sanitized mentions of my work in computers, stripped of any detail that might overshadow their favorite child. "How you talk about me matters," I said. "Not because I need you to brag, but because it shows whether you actually see me. I am not just the backup plan. I am not just the one who turned out fine. I am your daughter and you treated me like a resource." My mother's shoulders sagged. "You are right," she said simply. We sat in silence for a while. There were things they could never undo. The forgotten birthdays, the minimized achievements, the way they had dragged my name into their drama with the Callisters. But there was one thing they could change: what happened next. "I am willing to move forward," I said slowly, "but there will be boundaries. Clear ones." My father leaned forward. "Anything he said, name them. No more talking about my money," I began. "No more hinting or joking about how I should help out with big expenses. If you have a financial problem, you talk to a financial advisor or a lawyer. Not to me as your personal bank. I will not be manipulated through family guilt or traditions." They both nodded. "No triangulating," I added. "If you have an issue with me, you talk to me. Not to cousins, not to neighbors, not to Sophia. You do not build pressure campaigns behind my back." My mother winced. "That was wrong," she admitted. And finally I said, "You stop pretending that what happened to me did not happen. You stop minimizing it, or calling me sensitive, or acting like I am holding a grudge for fun. It was real. It was unjust. You sit with that." My parents looked at each other, then back at me. "We can do that," my father said. "We will try," my mother corrected. "And when we fail, you have permission to call us on it and walk away for a while if you need to. We will not call that betrayal." It was not a perfect moment. There was no soaring music, no sudden erasure of pain. This was not the tidy ending of a courtroom drama where a judge declares everything settled, but it was a beginning. As I left the coffee shop, the late afternoon light washing over the parking lot, I felt something shift inside me. Justice, I realized, is rarely as dramatic as we think. It is not always about winning and losing, about seeing your oppressors punished. Sometimes it is about drawing a line in the sand and refusing to step back from it, no matter who complains. Sometimes the best revenge is not ruining someone else's life. It is simply refusing to let them ruin yours. In the weeks that followed, people kept waiting for the next explosion. Some relatives were sure my parents would cut me off completely for embarrassing them. Others whispered that I would eventually cave, that I would apologize for overreacting, that everything would go back to normal. Nothing exploded. Nothing went back to normal either. Instead, things changed in smaller, stranger ways. My mother started calling to tell me about her day without turning every conversation into a comparison between me and Sophia. She asked actual questions about my job, not just whether I was still at that company. She even looked up what cybersecurity analysts actually do. My father texted occasionally to ask my opinion on random news stories about data breaches, joking that his daughter could probably fix half the country if they would just listen to her. At first, I did not trust it. I kept waiting for the catch, for the sideways request, for the subtle hint about money or favors. But it did not come. Sophia, meanwhile, settled into married life with Evan in a small rental house, not the grand riverfront property my parents had dreamed of bragging about. She sent me photos of their first Christmas tree, lopsided and covered in mismatched ornaments. She invited me and our grandparents for Thanksgiving dinner and insisted on making Grandma June's pie recipe herself. It was not perfect. There were tense moments, awkward silences, and old habits fighting to resurface. But underneath it all, something else was growing: respect. One evening, months later, I sat alone in my apartment, the city humming softly outside, and thought about the word revenge. When people search for revenge stories online, they usually want drama. Affairs exposed at weddings, hidden clauses in wills that leave greedy relatives with nothing, bosses humiliated in front of entire companies. My story does not look like that. There was no dramatic inheritance twist. No lawyer reading a secret document where I suddenly got everything and Sophia got nothing. No judge pounding a gavel while my parents were forced to face legal consequences for emotional neglect. All I did was say no. But for a woman like me, raised to believe that my value was in how much I could endure, that tiny word was a revolution. Saying no meant refusing to let my family's manipulation define my choices. It meant stepping out of the role of reliable oldest daughter and into my own life. It meant facing accusations of selfishness, of betrayal, of being the villain in a story where I had always been the quiet extra. It meant accepting that some people would never fully understand and doing it anyway. Revenge, I realized, is not always about tables turned in a spectacular way. Sometimes it is about a table quietly reset. I had spent my childhood watching my parents chase image over integrity, watching them pour money and energy into things that made them look like good parents, while neglecting the unglamorous work of actually being good parents to both their daughters. By refusing to help them lie to the world with a fancy wedding, I forced them to confront the truth. Their favoritism, their fear, their mistakes. I did not do it with screaming. I did it with a boundary, and that boundary changed everything. Chapter 9. If this story hits home. If you are still listening, if any part of this family drama and quiet revenge feels uncomfortably familiar, I want to say something directly to you. Maybe you are the oldest daughter who was told to be strong while your brother or sister was protected from every consequence. Maybe you watched your parents fund their weddings, their businesses, their comfort while you were told that asking for help was selfish. Maybe you were left out of a will because you were doing fine while someone else was rewarded for needing more. Maybe you have spent years being the reliable one, the fixer, the emotional dumping ground, and now you are wondering what you are supposed to do with all that resentment. I cannot tell you to burn it all down. That is not my story. What I can tell you is that you are allowed to say no. You are allowed to say no to paying for weddings that exist only to impress people who do not care about you. You are allowed to say no to bailing out parents who never once showed up for your crises. You are allowed to say no to siblings who treat you like a resource instead of a person. You are allowed to step back from toxic family gatherings, from Thanksgiving dinners that leave you in tears, from Christmas mornings that feel more like performance than love. You are allowed to define what justice looks like in your own life. For me, justice looked like walking my sister down the aisle at a small community center instead of writing a check that would have hollowed me out. It looked like letting my parents feel the consequences of their own promises instead of rushing in to save them. It looked like sitting in a Starbucks and listening to overdue apologies without pretending they fixed everything. It looked like building a life where my worth is not measured by how much I sacrifice, but by how fully I live. If you have your own story of betrayal, of inheritance drama, of being excluded or used, I hope you remember this. You are not the villain for wanting boundaries. You are not selfish for wanting fairness. You are not cruel for letting other people feel the weight of their choices. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply this. You stop playing the role they wrote for you. You write your own, and you let the rest of the world adjust. I still live in Portland. I still work in cybersecurity, spending my days protecting companies from threats they cannot see. The irony is not lost on me. My relationship with my parents is fragile but real. They still slip sometimes, still catch themselves almost saying something about how easy it must be for me financially. But now when they do, they stop. They correct themselves. They apologize. Sophia and I text most days. We send each other silly memes, recipes, small updates about our lives. She tells me about her job search, about trying to find work that feels like more than just another performance. I tell her about difficult clients, about the weird loneliness of being the only woman in a room full of men in suits and ties. Grandma June and Grandpa Harold are slowing down, but they are still sharp as ever. Sometimes we sit at their kitchen table and talk about what will happen one day with their house, their savings, their things. They insist that everything is written down equal and clear. No surprises, Grandpa says, no favorites. We have seen what that does. I tell them I do not care about the money, and I mean it. What I care about is the principle. Everyone deserves to grow up in a family where love is not rationed like a scarce resource, where support is not given only to the child who makes the parents look good, where justice is not something you have to fight for in secret. Not everyone gets that, but even if you did not, you can still choose what happens next. You can choose to be the one who breaks the pattern. You can choose to be the parent, the aunt, the grandmother who does not repeat the mistake. You can choose to tell the truth even if your voice shakes. You can choose to say, "This was not fair," and refuse to be shamed for it. That is what I did. I did not ruin a wedding. I did not destroy a family. I did not march into a lawyer's office and demand my share of some hidden inheritance. I simply refused to bankroll a lie, and because of that, my sister got a marriage instead of a show. My parents got a chance to face the people they really were. and I got my life back. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever felt like the invisible daughter, the backup plan, the quiet one carrying everyone else's burdens, I want to hear from you. Share your story. Tell me about the time you said no, about the time you wished you had, about the inheritance you were cut out of the will that shocked you, the promotion you did not get because of favoritism, the Christmas or Thanksgiving dinner that changed everything. You are not alone. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, stories of betrayal, of family drama, of karma, and tables turned, not always with fireworks, but with real human change, make sure you stick around. Like, comment, subscribe. Not just for me, for every woman who has ever been told to stay quiet while everyone else celebrated on her back. Our voices are the one kind of revenge no one can take away.